Joining us now live to discuss what this week's trial is expected to look like is political analyst Paul Lisnek. Welcome.
Hey, good evening.
So what do you expect to see Tuesday and going forward? How long do you expect this to last?
Well, that's a good question. You know, we don't have a lot of the answers to those questions yet. We don't know whether testimony is going to be allowed. We do know that the last trial, the first impeachment trial, went 3 weeks, and both sides wanted to go shorter than that. I've seen that. Republicans wanted to take a couple of days. Democrats are talking about as much as a couple of weeks. So, and those are the only parameters anybody can legitimately say right now. I will offer this guess, which is because the Senate wants to do other work while this is going on, we may, and we haven't even seen the schedule yet, but I would not be surprised if they announce that they will do morning business, such as dealing with cabinet appointments and that kind of thing, and then turn to the trial at noon or 1 o'clock Washington, D.C. time. I think you're going to see them split the days.
What are Democrats thinking here? Because it seems very unlikely that they're going to prevail in this second impeachment. What is their main goal here?
You know, Rutabaga, it's not about getting a conviction because they're very well aware, I think, that that's not going to happen. I think they view it two ways. Number one, constitutionally, they have no choice but to have this trial. The House impeached, it goes to the Senate, and the Senate's required to have a trial. That's just period, end of story with regard to why it has to happen. Secondly, I think that they believe that if there were no trial, there would be no airing of these issues. And, you know, Republican or Democrat, when you look at what happened on January 6th in the Capitol, it was a shocking day, one that has truly never been seen in the history of the United States. I mean, no one's attacked the Capitol since the War of 1812. And this is something I think a lot of Democrats feel needs to never be forgotten. Now, what do they hope to get out of this if there is no conviction? There's a lot of unanswered questions about that, constitutionally speaking. Number one, can they still go ahead and censure President Trump after he's out of office? Number two, can they keep him from running for office in 2024 and or from getting the perks that he gets, like office expenses and that kind of thing? These are unclear answers because they've never been tested before. Republicans would say you can't do that unless you convict him. Democrats would say these are really separate things. We don't have the answers to those things right now. They've got to be challenged and tried out through the courts. And
Republicans are saying that impeachment is not constitutional in the first place, right? Because he's not a sitting president anymore.
Well, they are. Look, you know, as a partisan issue, Republicans are saying it's an unconstitutional thing to do. Democrats are saying it's constitutional. As a lawyer, it's absolutely constitutional. Look, there is no precedent of a president who's already left office going through this before, so that part is true. It's also not a frivolous argument to say that this should not be happening against a president who's no longer in office. However, when you look at the precedent that exists, number one, a case that people seem to talk about all the time, a guy named William Belknap, Secretary of War under Ulysses S. Grant, who when he heard that he was about to be impeached because he was taking bribes, ran to the White House and said, "I quit. You can't fire me. They can't impeach me." Well, they did impeach him, and there was a trial. But even more so, here's the piece of history most people don't talk about. When the Founding Fathers wrote this section of the Constitution, at that time in England, there was a trial going on of an official who was already out of office. And there was no question that they could hold the trial at that time. And if you look back at sort of the commentary and such of the Founding Fathers when this was written, there is no question that they knew that this could be for people who were already out of office. And arguably, constitutionally, this is exactly what has to happen. That is not a partisan comment in any means. That is a legal comment based on somebody who teaches constitutional law. That's what I would teach my students, that this is a constitutional procedure to have happen, regardless of what happens in the end.
Democrats unlikely to subpoena former President Trump and risk a drawn-out legal battle. So how do you see this playing out? And also, briefly before you go, what do you think about the witness issue? We heard Congressman Adam Schiff talk about that.
Well, I think first of all, with regard to President Trump, he's been invited. He's not going to speak. He's not going to testify. If they go after him with the subpoena, which they could, that's going to drag out through the courts for years or certainly months, even if it goes in an expedited way. Democrats don't want to do that themselves. With regard to other witnesses, you know, the only group of witnesses I think is important is that one of the strongest pieces of evidence there is here is to talk about the president's conduct while the insurrection, and that's what it was going on with these domestic terrorists. What was the president doing? Reports are that he was watching it on television and not doing anything about it. You can't really say that with any weight without having people, staffers in the White House testify to that. That would mean testimony, witnesses. That would mean Republicans will want to call them. I just don't think they want to go there, so I don't know that we'll see anything.
Paul Lisnek, pleasure to have you on tonight. Thank you so much.
Thanks for the bet.